Have you ever felt completely overwhelmed by your emotions, so much so that you said or did something you later regretted? You're not alone. Every one of us has faced moments where our feelings seem to control us, rather than the other way around. And when that subsinging voice is your own, it's about learning how to take control so they don't control you. Today, I want to explore how mastering emotional discipline can transform not just your mindset, but your entire life. Imagine standing at a crossroads every time a strong emotion hits you: anger, fear, jealousy. One path leads to regret, broken relationships, and lost opportunities. The other leads to peace, clarity, and growth. The choice isn't just about what you feel, but what you do next. The question is, which path will you choose when your emotions pull you in different directions? Have your emotions ever made a decision for you that your mind later regretted? This question doesn't just open a speech, it opens a doorway into personal reflection. It catches people off guard, not with facts or logic, but with the undeniable truth of their own experiences. Everyone has at least one moment in life where emotions overrode reason. This question invites them to revisit that moment, not with shame, but with awareness. When a speaker asks a question like this at the very beginning, it immediately activates a mental replay. The audience stops being passive listeners and starts becoming mentally involved. They sift through their memories, perhaps thinking about the time they yelled when they should have listened, or quit when they should have pushed through. A single, well-placed question has the power to shift the entire emotional atmosphere in the room. Unlike generic introductions, a personal question bridges the gap between the speaker and the audience. It makes the topic relevant, urgent, and real. People don't engage because they're told to, they engage because they feel something. This question prompts emotion while simultaneously introducing the exact subject you're about to discuss. The power and the pitfalls of emotional response. The beauty of such a question is that it doesn't accuse, it invites. It's not pointing fingers or placing blame. Instead, it's asking, have you been here too? That small invitation creates instant rapport. It removes the barrier between the ones speaking and the ones listening. Now, it's not just a speech, it's a conversation, and everyone in the room is participating, even if they never say a word. A strong opening question works because it taps into shared human experience. Emotions are something we all have in common, regardless of age, culture, or background. That makes this kind of opening universally relatable. Whether you're speaking to executives or high school students, that emotional misstep, that moment of regret, connects everyone. The question also sets the tone. It hints at the vulnerability, honesty, and strength that will be required to really confront the topic. The audience realizes this isn't just theory, this is about me. Suddenly, emotional discipline isn't a distant ideal, it's a personal challenge. They become more than spectators, they're now emotionally invested. Using a question to begin a speech also naturally builds anticipation. The moment the question is asked, people want to know, what's the answer? What insight is coming next? It creates an open loop, a psychological curiosity that drives attention forward. They're not just listening because they have to. They're listening because they need to hear what comes next. It also allows the speaker to lead with humility. By asking a question, you're not presenting yourself as the one with all the answers. You're presenting yourself as someone who understands the struggle. That balance of authority and relatability makes the message far more powerful. It says, I've been where you are. Let's walk through this together. The right question opens the heart before the mind. Once people are emotionally engaged, they are far more likely to accept new perspectives, challenge their current habits, and remember your words. Facts inform, emotions transform. A great speech starts by touching the heart, and a great question is often the hand that does the touching. In just one sentence, a question can disarm defenses, stir memories, and ignite curiosity. And when that sentence is drawn from the listener's own life, their regrets, their impulses, their emotions, it becomes more than just an opening line. It becomes the moment the audience leans in and silently says, "I'm listening, you're talking about me." When you speak about emotions, it's not enough to describe them in abstract terms. You have to bring them to life in ways your audience immediately recognizes. That's where relatable examples become essential. When you say anger can destroy relationships, it's powerful, but when you describe someone snapping at their partner in the heat of the moment, only to regret it later, it becomes real. The audience doesn't just hear the concept, they feel it, because they've lived it. Relatable examples act like emotional mirrors. When the audience hears about someone getting anxious before a presentation or hesitating to speak up out of fear of judgment, they don't need to imagine how it feels, they already know. That recognition is what deepens their engagement. They stop seeing the speech as advice from a stranger and start experiencing it as a reflection of their own journey. Emotions are deeply personal, and so are the stories that surround them. When you use everyday scenarios, a heated argument with a friend, the panic before a job interview, the guilt after lashing out, you draw people into the message in a way that theory alone can never accomplish. These examples are not dramatic or extreme. They're human. That's what makes them powerful. Not everyone in your audience may understand complex psychology, but everyone knows what it feels like to say something in anger and regret it. Everyone has hesitated because of fear. Everyone has had a moment where they wished they had responded differently. These shared experiences create an emotional bridge between you and your listeners. And once that bridge is built, your message has a clear path to their hearts. Using relatable examples also gives clarity to abstract ideas. Emotional discipline may sound like a vague or lofty concept, but when you break it down into a moment, like choosing to breathe and pause instead of yelling when you're frustrated, suddenly the audience can see what it looks like in action. Abstract principles only become useful when they are anchored in real-life application. What's important is that these examples don't need to be dramatic or overly polished. In fact, the more ordinary they are, the more effective they tend to be. A story about resisting the urge to reply to a hurtful message or staying calm when a coworker takes credit for your work. These are the kinds of things people face regularly. When your examples reflect their daily lives, your message becomes instantly credible. Relatable examples also help bypass resistance. If you simply tell someone you need to control your anger, they might feel defensive, but if you describe a situation where someone lost their temper, then show how it could have gone differently, the listener is more likely to draw the connection themselves. You're not telling them what you think, you're helping them see it through a story. Moreover, examples give your speech rhythm, a balance between message and moment, idea and illustration, keeps the audience mentally engaged. They're not just hearing a stream of concepts. They're watching a series of emotional snapshots that bring the speech to life. Just like a movie, the audience stays with you not because of theory, but because of the scenes you create. Another advantage of using examples is emotional layering. A speech filled only with advice can feel flat, but when you add relatable stories about failure, frustration, regret, or small victories, you create emotional depth. The audience doesn't just understand the need for emotional discipline, they feel why it matters. That emotional connection is what drives change. In the end, your audience remembers moments, not bullet points. They might forget the definition of emotional regulation, but they will remember the story of woman who almost quit her job in a moment of rage, or the man who held his tongue during a family conflict and saved a relationship. Examples aren't decorations, they're the delivery system for message, and when they're drawn from everyday life, they don't just support your speech, they become it. Contrast is one of the most powerful tools in communication because the human brain is wired to notice differences. When you present two opposing ideas side by side, like emotional control versus emotional chaos, you sharpen the message and make it more memorable. People may not remember a list of tips, but they will remember how it felt when you described the pain of losing control next to the strength of staying composed. When you speak about emotional discipline, it's easy for message to become one-sided, focused only on the benefits. But contrast adds dimension. It shows what's at stake. For instance, you might describe someone who reacts impulsively and damages a relationship, then show the same moment handled with restraint and calm, leading to understanding and growth. The difference between those two paths makes your point hit harder. People don't always change because they're inspired. Sometimes they change because they're confronted with what might happen if they don't. Contrast allows you to highlight both the reward and the consequence. You show the audience what emotional maturity leads to, but also what emotional impulsiveness can cost. That balance is what motivates real reflection. A speech that only talks about positive outcomes can feel distant or idealistic, but when you lay out both sides, the pain of regret versus the peace of self-control, the damage of lashing out versus the power of staying calm, you make the message feel real. You're not just selling hope, you're also showing the price of inaction, and that dual perspective carries far more weight. Contrast also creates clarity. It defines boundaries. When you show what emotional chaos looks like, yelling, breaking things, shutting down, and then contrast it with calm listening, deep breathing, and mindful response, your audience sees a clear map of what they're aiming for. It eliminates confusion and shows that emotional discipline isn't vague. It's visible, practical, and achievable. The emotional impact of contrast cannot be overstated. Think about how it feels to hear "you could lose everything in a moment of anger," then hear "or you could save everything by taking a deep breath." That shift in tone, from danger to control, from fear to empowerment, stirs emotion in the audience, and emotion drives action. You can also use contrast to expose the gap between who we are and who we want to be. Most people want to see themselves as composed, rational, and emotionally intelligent. But by contrasting that ideal with how they sometimes actually behave, you challenge them gently but honestly to bridge that gap. You give them a reason to grow. Contrast also adds drama. It brings a storytelling quality to your message, even when you're not telling a full story. When you paint vivid opposites, chaos and clarity, destruction and discipline, reaction and response, you engage the imagination. People don't just hear what you're saying, they visualize it. And what the mind can see, the heart can feel. Another reason contrast is so effective is because it activates choice. When people see both paths laid out clearly, they are more likely to take ownership of their direction. You're not forcing them to change, you're showing them two outcomes and asking, which one do you want? That invitation to choose is far more powerful than any command. Ultimately, contrast isn't just a technique. It's the frame that makes the message stand out. Without it, a speech can feel flat or vague. With it, your words come to life. Your audience doesn't just understand emotional discipline, they see it, feel it, and recognize the critical role it plays in their everyday decisions. It's not just a concept anymore. It's a choice they can make starting now. Repetition is one of the oldest and most effective tools in public speaking. It's not just a rhetorical device. It's a way to drive a message deeper into the mind and memory of the audience. When you repeat a key phrase or idea, you're telling the listener this matters. Don't miss it. And when it's done well, that phrase begins to echo in their minds long after the speech is over. In a speech about emotional discipline, repetition can be used to hammer home the core truth that emotions don't have to control us. You might say, you are not your anger, you are not your fear, you are not your pain. That kind of repetition not only emphasizes the point, it creates a rhythm, a structure, a sense of authority. The audience doesn't just hear it once and move on. They sit with it, they absorb it, they start to believe it. Repetition also builds emotional momentum. A single sentence may move the audience slightly, but when that sentence, or a variation of it, is repeated, the emotional impact grows stronger each time. Think of a speaker who says, breathe, just breathe, when it's hard, when it's loud, when it's painful, breathe. The repetition becomes almost like a mantra, something the audience can carry with them beyond the moment. In many speeches, the most quoted or remembered lines are those that were repeated. This is no accident. Our brains latch onto patterns. Repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity leads to memory. If you want your audience to remember one core idea, like discipline your emotions before they discipline you, then repeating it throughout the speech in different contexts ensures it sticks. It's important to understand that repetition doesn't mean redundancy. It's not about saying the exact same thing word for word over and over. It's about revisiting the same message from different angles, using slightly different language, tone, or emotional context. This keeps it engaging while reinforcing the same core truth. Another benefit of repetition is that it creates a sense of structure and stability within the speech. Especially when dealing with emotional topics, people can feel overwhelmed or unsure. But when you return to a familiar line or phrase, it feels grounding. It's like a steady drumbeat under the message, something the audience can rely on, something they can hold on to. Repetition also enhances persuasion. In a world flooded with information, people don't change their minds because they hear something once. They change because they hear something again and again in a way that resonates. Repeating a powerful idea helps overcome resistance. It seeps past the surface and into belief. It also creates musicality. Great speeches are not just well written, they're well heard. The ear responds to rhythm and flow, and repetition plays a key role in that. It creates cadence, a lyrical quality that turns ordinary words into memorable phrases. People may not remember every detail, but they'll remember how the speech sounded and how that sound made them feel. For emotional topics especially, repetition helps anchor people in the present moment. When emotions rise, either in the speaker or the listener, repeated phrases can act like emotional checkpoints. They remind the audience of the central message, even as their minds drift or their emotions swell. It keeps the experience cohesive and focused. Ultimately, repetition is not about style, it's about impact. When you repeat a message with intention, you're shaping how people think, what they remember, and how they act. You're not just speaking to them for a moment. You're creating echoes that can follow them for a lifetime. And in a message as important as emotional discipline, those echoes can make all the difference. Some lines in a speech do more than inform. They hit you. They stay with you. They make you stop and think. Not because they're complex, but because they're emotionally charged. These are emotional power lines. They are short, sharp, and deep. And in a speech about disciplining your emotions, these kinds of lines are essential because they carry the weight of the message straight into the audience's heart. Power lines work because they are distilled truth. Instead of explaining a concept for 5 minutes, a single sentence delivers the essence. A line like feeling something is human, but acting on it is a choice. It doesn't just explain emotional discipline, it embodies it. It delivers a lesson, a realization, and a call to self-awareness all at once. That's what makes these lines resonate on such a deep level. When you craft a power line, it should feel like something the audience might write down, repeat to themselves, or even post on a wall. It needs rhythm, clarity, and emotional resonance. These lines become anchors for the entire message. They are the phrases people recall days or even years later because something about them felt personal, important, and true. The strength of a power line is that it can cut through the noise. In a world where people hear thousands of messages a day, a strong, emotionally charged sentence can break through the clutter. It grabs attention not because it shouts, but because it speaks directly to something universal: pain, fear, regret, strength, choice. These are human experiences, and power lines name them in a way that feels immediate and real. They are also highly effective during emotional peaks in a speech. When the audience is already emotionally stirred, one well-placed line can transform that feeling into insight. Imagine building up to a moment, then saying quietly, "You don't have to obey every emotion you feel." That one sentence, delivered at the right moment, can become a turning point for someone listening. Power lines also give the speaker confidence and clarity. They serve as guideposts in the speech moments where the message crystallizes. They help organize the content around key emotional truths, making it easier for the audience to follow and remember. They function almost like emotional punctuation, marking the moments that matter most. These lines don't need to be complicated. In fact, their strength lies in their simplicity. Breathe before you break. Not every reaction deserves your energy. Silence is strength when words are weapons. These aren't academic or technical phrases. They're emotional truths wrapped in sharp, memorable language. That's what gives them power. When used strategically, power lines can shift the emotional temperature in the room. They can calm a restless audience, stir a quiet one, or create a pause for reflection. People often stop taking notes or shifting in their seats when they hear one. They lean in. That's when you know it landed. That's when you know it hit something deeper than just thought. Over time, power lines take on a life of their own. They get quoted, shared, repeated. They may even outlive the rest of the speech. This is the mark of a truly resonant message, not that it was heard once, but that it keeps speaking long after the moment has passed. Emotional power lines are not just sound bites, they're emotional fingerprints left behind on the audience. In a speech about emotional discipline, where the subject matter is internal, invisible, and often difficult to articulate, power lines act like light switches. They illuminate something people have always felt but never been able to say, and once you give them the words, they feel seen. They feel understood. That connection is what transforms a speech from good to unforgettable. There's something almost magical about the number 3 in communication. It's been used in storytelling, speeches, and persuasion for thousands of years. The rule of 3 is simple. Ideas presented in threes are more engaging, more memorable, and more satisfying to the human brain. In a speech about disciplining your emotions, using this structure can give your message rhythm, clarity, and power. When you say something once, it may not land. When you say it twice, it might feel repetitive. But say it 3 times, especially in different ways, and it starts to feel intentional, even poetic. Think of a line like, "When you master your anger, you protect your peace." When you control your fear, you unlock your potential. When you manage your sadness, you reclaim your strength. 3 different emotions, 3 outcomes, 1 powerful structure. The rule of 3 also makes your ideas feel complete. The audience senses resolution when they hear 3 elements. It satisfies a natural cognitive pattern. That's why so many famous phrases follow the rule of 3. Mind, body, spirit. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Stop, drop, and roll. Our minds are wired to process and retain this kind of structure instinctively. In an emotionally charged speech, the rule of 3 allows you to build emotional intensity without overwhelming your audience. You start with one example to set the tone, another to deepen the impact, and a third to drive it home. For example, describing emotional discipline could follow this rhythm. It's the pause before the reaction, the breath before the words, the choice before the damage. Each phrase adds weight and meaning without crowding the message. Using this rule also gives your speech a sense of flow. It creates natural breaks and beats, almost like a heartbeat guiding the pace of your words. You might not even need to raise your voice. Just the rhythm itself is enough to command attention. That's what makes the rule of 3 so effective in both calm and passionate delivery styles. Another reason this technique works is because it creates emotional layering. You can start with a surface level point, move into a deeper emotional example, and finish with a call to action, all within 3 concise parts. It allows you to guide the listener gently through complexity without confusion. It's structure without stiffness, rhythm without redundancy. The rule of 3 is especially useful when reinforcing your core message. In a speech about emotional discipline, you might repeat a line 3 times with slight variations. Discipline your anger, discipline your fear, discipline your pride. Each repetition strengthens the idea and shows its relevance across different emotional challenges. It frames the concept as broad, practical, and universally applicable. It also invites participation from the audience. As you build a rhythm using the rule of 3, people often begin to anticipate the pattern. They may even mentally finish the 3rd part before you say it. This subtle engagement pulls them into the speech, making them feel like active participants in the message rather than passive listeners. Even in closing statements, the rule of 3 can leave a lasting impression. Ending with 3 sharp, emotionally resonant ideas gives your audience a final sense of balance and completeness. Stay calm, stay present, stay in control. That's not just a conclusion. It's a command that feels actionable and empowering because of how it's structured. Ultimately, the rule of 3 works because it respects how people listen. It mirrors how we naturally absorb information, and it transforms ideas from vague concepts into clear, resonant messages. When you use it in a speech about emotions, something often messy and hard to grasp, you create clarity without losing depth, and impact without losing humanity. In public speaking, especially when discussing something as personal and intense as emotional discipline, the power of short sentences cannot be overstated. Short sentences land quickly. They don't get lost in complexity. They hit hard, stay sharp, and leave a mark. When emotions are running high, people don't want lectures. They want clarity. A short sentence delivers it in an instant. Emotionally charged topics already carry weight. When a speaker adds long, winding sentences, the message can get diluted or lost. But a short sentence cuts through the noise. Pause before you speak. Anger is not control. You are not your feelings. Each one is a complete thought, and each one leaves no room for confusion. The impact lies in their simplicity. Short sentences also create space for reflection, for emotion, for silence. After delivering a powerful short line, the pause that follows is just as meaningful. It gives the audience a moment to absorb what was said. Don't react, respond. That's not just advice. It becomes an instruction, a command, a mantra, and it lingers in the silence afterward. These kinds of sentences carry emotional weight because they mirror the inner dialogue people have with themselves. In moments of conflict or pressure, no one thinks in long academic paragraphs. They think in fragments. Walk away, not worth it, stay calm. When your speech echoes the natural rhythm of those internal conversations, your words feel more real and relevant. Short sentences also help manage the pacing of a speech. You can use them to speed up or slow down the energy in the room. A string of short sentences creates urgency and intensity. You snapped, you shouted, you regretted it. It mimics the rhythm of emotional escalation. Then, with a calm short line like, "It didn't have to end that way," you shift the tone and take control of the emotional flow. They are also more memorable. The audience won't remember every insight or detail, but they'll remember that one line that hit home. Breathe first, a choose piece. Emotions are not instructions. These become anchors the listener can return to, especially in real-life situations when they need a guiding phrase to keep them centered. Short sentences are disarming. When someone is defensive or emotionally closed off, a long explanation can feel overwhelming or preachy. But a short sentence slips past resistance. It's gentle but firm. It offers wisdom without demanding submission. It gives people something small enough to hold on to, yet big enough to change their behavior. This technique also shows confidence. When a speaker can say something meaningful in just a few words, it signals clarity and control. There's no need to impress with vocabulary or overwhelm with theory. Instead, there's a calm assurance in letting a short, precise sentence carry the message. And in a talk about emotional discipline, that quiet strength speaks volumes. In emotionally vulnerable moments, the brain doesn't process complexity well. Stress narrows focus. That's why short sentences are perfect for key takeaways. They cut through the fog of emotion and offer guidance that feels doable. They don't just sound good, they're usable in real time when clarity is most needed. The most powerful moments in a speech often come from the fewest words. When you strip away the excess, what's left is the core, and in the context of emotional discipline, that core might be just this: feel it, don't feed it, control it. That's the kind of line that sticks. It doesn't just end the sentence, it starts a transformation. A speech about disciplining your emotions isn't just meant to inform, it's meant to empower. People don't come to hear a talk like this because they want theories. They come because they want to believe they can be stronger than the feelings that sometimes control them. That's why it's essential to speak to their power, not just their problems. When you empower the audience, you don't just give them knowledge. You give them permission to take ownership of their emotions and actions. Too often, people feel like victims of their emotions. They say things like, "I couldn't help it," or "That's just how I am." These beliefs become cages. Your job as a speaker is to break those bars. You do that by reminding them that discipline isn't about denying emotion, it's about directing it. You give them language that says, "You are not helpless, you are not broken, you are capable." Empowerment comes through reframing. Instead of saying, "You need to control your emotions," say, "You have the power to control your emotions." That slight shift changes the tone from demand to encouragement. It moves the listener from feeling judged to feeling seen. It says, you already have what you need, now use it. That kind of language uplifts without excusing. It challenges without shaming. When you empower the audience, you position them as the hero in their own story. You're not rescuing them. You're revealing their strength. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be aware, and once you're aware, you can choose differently. That's a line that gives people hope without avoiding responsibility. It places the power back where it belongs, in their hands. Empowerment also means normalizing the struggle. You help people understand that failing to control emotions doesn't make them weak, it makes them human. But staying stuck in that failure, that's a choice. And once they realize it's a choice, they can begin to change. You don't speak at them, you speak to them, reminding them that growth is messy but possible. You use inclusive language. Not you people, and not some of you, but we. We all have moments where we say things we don't mean. We all feel things we wish we didn't, but we all have the power to pause, to think, to choose. That kind of collective framing removes shame and replaces it with shared humanity. It tells the audience you're not alone in this, but you're not stuck either. Real empowerment also includes practical takeaways. You don't just tell the audience they have control, you show them how to access it. Whether it's a breathing technique, a self-awareness check, or a reflective question like, is this feeling worth the damage it might cause? You give them tools they can actually use. Empowerment without direction can feel hollow, but when paired with actionable steps, it becomes life-changing. Tone matters just as much as content. When you speak with calm strength, when you embody the very discipline you're teaching, your presence reinforces your message. Empowerment is not about hype or intensity. It's about grounded belief in people's capacity to do hard things. Speak to that belief, and people will rise to meet it. You also empower by making the outcome feel worth it. No one wants to discipline their emotions just for the sake of control. They want peace. They want clarity. They want healthier relationships, so connect the discipline to the deeper rewards. You don't discipline your anger to impress anyone. You do it to protect your peace. You do it because your future is too important to let a moment of emotion ruin it. In the end, empowering the audience isn't about making them feel good for a few minutes. It's about helping them see who they could become if they start choosing differently. Your message should leave them with more than just understanding. It should leave them with belief. Not belief in you, but belief in themselves. And once they believe they have power over their emotions, they begin to take back power over their entire life. A strong closing statement is more than just the final words of a speech. It's the moment your entire message is distilled into something unforgettable. It's your last chance to leave an emotional imprint, to solidify the core of what you've said, and to inspire action. In a speech about disciplining your emotions, the closing must be clear, confident, and emotionally resonant. It should feel like a full stop, not a fade out. People may not remember every story you shared or every argument you made, but they will remember how you made them feel at the end. That's why the closing line should carry the emotional weight of everything that came before it. It should leave them thinking, feeling, and most importantly, believing that change is possible, that strength is within reach, and that discipline over their emotions can reshape their lives. A strong closing often brings the speech full circle. If you opened with a question, return to it. If you started with a personal story, close with the lesson learned from it. This symmetry creates a sense of completion in the minds of your audience. It makes the speech feel intentional, structured, and emotionally satisfying. You remember how we began. You imply, here's why it mattered. Short, punchy closings often land the hardest. Long-winded conclusions can weaken the emotional high you've built. You want the audience to feel the message, not get lost in a summary. Lines like, "Discipline your emotions, rule your mind, win your life," are sharp, rhythmic, and complete. They don't explain, they declare. That declaration carries finality and strength. The closing line should speak to identity. Don't just tell people what to do, remind them who they are or who they could become. You're not a slave to emotion. You are the master of your choices. That's not just advice, it's a redefinition. It challenges the listener to walk out of the room seeing themselves differently, holding themselves to a higher standard. Sometimes the strongest closings are quiet, not loud. A soft, intentional tone can carry just as much power as a raised voice. The silence that follows a well-delivered final line can be more moving than applause. It's the kind of pause that happens when people are thinking, when they're moved, when something inside them has shifted. That's the sign of a message that landed. A powerful closing should also have emotional clarity. Don't introduce new ideas. This isn't the time to explain another concept. It's the time to seal what's already been said. Think of the closing as the final brushstroke on a painting. Everything else has already shaped the picture. Now, it's just about leaving the right impression. Repetition can work well here too. Repeating your main message or a key phrase one last time gives the audience something to hold on to. You can pause, you can breathe, you can choose. That repetition not only reinforces, it reassures. It speaks to the part of the audience that is still doubting, still unsure. And it says, yes, even you. The most impactful closings also offer hope. Not false positivity, but real hope grounded in strength and choice. You want to end by lifting your audience. It's not in a motivational cliché, but in a truth that acknowledges the struggle while pointing towards something better. You're not expected to feel nothing, you're expected to choose wisely. And that's within your power. A strong closing makes the message unforgettable because it moves from idea to emotion, from concept to conviction. It's not just the end of the speech, it's the beginning of something new for the listener. If done well, it's the line that echoes in their mind when they face their next emotional test. And in that moment, your words might just give them the strength to choose differently. Stories have a unique power to reach people where facts and figures cannot. When you share a story about disciplining emotions, you invite the audience into a lived experience. They don't just hear your words, they feel the situation, see the struggle, and relate on a human level. This connection makes your message far more impactful and memorable. Examples bring abstract ideas down to earth. It's one thing to say, control your anger, but it's another to describe a moment when someone almost lost their temper but chose to pause instead. When you paint these real-life pictures, you give your audience a template they can imagine themselves following. They see the practical application of your advice, making it easier to internalize and replicate. The best stories often include conflict and resolution. They show that emotional discipline isn't easy, it's a process. A story might recount a heated argument where one person took a breath, stepped back, and avoided a fallout. This contrast, the tension and the calm response, highlights the power of discipline more vividly than any explanation ever could. Personal stories are especially effective because they build trust and authenticity. When a speaker shares their own struggles with emotions, it breaks down the barrier between them and the audience. It says, I'm human too. I face these challenges and so do you. This vulnerability fosters connection and makes the advice feel grounded in reality, not just theory. You can also use stories to challenge common misconceptions. For example, a story about someone who was seen as weak for not reacting immediately but later found strength in patience disrupts the idea that emotional expression always means strength. These stories shift perspectives and open the audience's minds to new possibilities. Engaging examples don't have to be dramatic to be effective. Even small, everyday moments like choosing to respond calmly to a frustrating email can resonate deeply because they're relatable. When people see that emotional discipline plays out in ordinary situations, it feels achievable rather than daunting. Stories also give your speech a natural rhythm. They provide breaks from heavy concepts, weaving emotion and narrative into the fabric of your message. This balance keeps the audience attentive and emotionally connected. Instead of a lecture, your speech becomes a journey people want to follow. Using diverse examples ensures your message reaches a wider audience. Different people relate to different situations, so including a variety of stories about work, family, friendships, or self-doubt makes your message inclusive. It says, no matter who you are or where you come from, emotional discipline matters and is possible. Examples can also highlight consequences. Stories that show what happens when emotions go unchecked provide powerful motivation. Hearing about relationships strained or opportunities lost because of impulsive reactions makes the stakes real. It pushes the audience to see emotional discipline not just as a nice-to-have but as essential. Finally, ending your speech with a story can be incredibly impactful. A compelling narrative leaves the audience with a vivid image or feeling that lingers. It's the last thing they hear, and often the first thing they remember. When that story embodies your core message, it turns abstract ideas into lived truth, making your speech unforgettable. Emotional discipline isn't something you achieve overnight. It's a skill that grows stronger with consistent practice. Like building a muscle, your ability to manage emotions improves when you train it regularly. Each moment you choose to pause instead of react, you're reinforcing new neural pathways that support calmness and control. Consistency creates habits, and habits shape identity. When you consistently respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively, you start to see yourself differently. You no longer feel like a victim to your emotions, but someone who can navigate even the toughest feelings with grace. That shift in self-perception fuels further growth. It's easy to feel discouraged when setbacks happen. You might lose your temper or give in to anxiety after days or weeks of progress. But consistency doesn't mean perfection. It means returning to the practice again and again. Each small effort adds up, and every moment you choose discipline strengthens your resilience. Daily rituals help anchor emotional discipline in your life. Whether it's a morning mindfulness exercise, journaling your feelings, or setting intentions before stressful situations, these consistent habits prepare your mind to respond better. They create a foundation where emotional control becomes more natural and less forced. Consistency also helps you recognize triggers over time. When you pay attention regularly, patterns emerge. You start to notice which situations or people provoke strong reactions and why. This awareness is the first step toward managing those triggers instead of being blindsided by them. Building emotional discipline through consistency requires patience. Change happens gradually, often in subtle ways that you might not immediately notice. But if you stick with it, you'll look back months from now and realize how much calmer, clearer, and more in control you've become. Another powerful aspect of consistency is its effect on confidence. Each time you successfully manage your emotions, you prove to yourself that you can do it again. That growing confidence reduces fear and doubt, making it easier to face future emotional challenges head-on. Consistency also creates a ripple effect beyond your own emotions. When others see you maintaining calm and control, it influences how they interact with you. You become a source of stability in your relationships, which deepens trust and respect. Emotional discipline benefits not just you, but everyone around you. Sometimes, consistency means forgiving yourself when you falter and recommitting to the process. Emotional discipline isn't about rigid control, but compassionate persistence. When you treat yourself kindly and keep going, you build emotional endurance that carries you through difficult times. In the end, emotional discipline is a lifelong journey, not a destination. Consistency turns fleeting moments of control into lasting change. By showing up for yourself day after day, you build a powerful foundation that transforms how you experience and express your emotions, creating a life marked by strength, peace, and freedom. Self-awareness is the cornerstone of emotional discipline. You can't manage what you don't understand. When you take the time to observe your emotions without judgment, you begin to uncover what triggers them, how they build, and how they affect your thoughts and actions. This clarity is the first step toward mastery. Many people confuse their emotions with facts. They assume what they feel is the absolute truth in the moment. Self-awareness helps you separate feeling from fact. It allows you to recognize, I am angry, without believing that anger is the whole story or the only valid response. This distinction opens space for choice. Developing self-awareness requires honest reflection. It might involve asking yourself questions like, what am I really feeling right now? Or, why does this situation upset me? These questions encourage you to look beneath the surface emotions to the deeper fears, hopes, or beliefs fueling them. Understanding these layers reduces emotional reactivity. Journaling is a powerful tool for cultivating self-awareness. Writing down your emotional experiences helps you see patterns over time. You might notice that stress builds after certain types of conversations, or that sadness arises when specific needs go unmet. This record becomes a roadmap, guiding you toward better emotional management. Mindfulness practices also enhance self-awareness. By paying attention to your body's sensations, breathing, and thoughts in the present moment, you create a non-judgmental space where emotions can be observed rather than suppressed or exaggerated. This practice strengthens your ability to pause before reacting. Self-awareness grows through feedback too. Sometimes others can see our emotional blind spots better than we can. Being open to constructive criticism and listening deeply to trusted people provides valuable insights. When you combine external perspectives with internal reflection, your emotional understanding deepens. It's important to remember that self-awareness is a skill, not an innate trait. Some people may find it easier than others, but everyone can improve with practice. The more you cultivate this skill, the more naturally you'll catch emotional patterns and choose how to respond instead of being caught off guard. Another benefit of self-awareness is its impact on empathy. Understanding your own emotions better helps you recognize and respect the emotions of others. This creates healthier, more compassionate relationships and reduces conflicts caused by misunderstandings or assumptions. Self-awareness also fuels emotional resilience. When you can name and understand your emotions, they lose some of their power to overwhelm you. You feel more grounded and capable of facing challenges with calmness and clarity. It's like turning on a light in a dark room suddenly. The way forward is clearer. Ultimately, cultivating self-awareness transforms how you experience life. It shifts you from being a passenger on an emotional roller coaster to the driver of your emotional journey. This awareness is the foundation upon which all emotional discipline is built, enabling you to live with greater peace, purpose, and power. The way we talk to ourselves profoundly shapes how we experience and manage our emotions. Positive self-talk acts as an internal coach, guiding us through difficult moments with encouragement instead of criticism. When you discipline your emotions, cultivating kind and empowering inner dialogue is essential. Negative self-talk can escalate emotional reactions. Phrases like "I'm weak," "I can't handle this," or "I always mess up" fuel anxiety, frustration, and despair. These thoughts magnify feelings and make emotional control feel impossible. Recognizing and interrupting these patterns is the first step toward emotional discipline. Replacing negative self-talk with positive affirmations rewires your mindset. Simple statements like "I am capable of calm," "I choose peace over anger," or "this feeling will pass," help shift your focus from helplessness to agency. Over time, these affirmations become automatic responses that strengthen your emotional resilience. Positive self-talk also helps you stay grounded in the present moment. When emotions surge, reminding yourself "breathe" and "stay present," or "I can respond thoughtfully," pulls you back from spiraling thoughts or impulsive reactions. This moment of pause is critical for emotional regulation. It's important that positive self-talk feels authentic, not forced. Saying things you don't believe won't help and might even increase frustration. Start by noticing small successes and giving yourself credit. For example, "I handled that well," or "I'm learning every day," creates a foundation of trust with yourself. Another benefit of positive self-talk is that it promotes patience and compassion. Emotional discipline is a journey, and setbacks are natural. When you tell yourself "it's okay to struggle" or "I'm doing my best," you soften the harshness of self-judgment and maintain motivation to keep practicing. Consistent positive self-talk reshapes your brain's response to stress. Neuroscience shows that affirming thoughts activate areas associated with calm and control, reducing the intensity of emotional reactions. This biological shift makes discipline easier and more sustainable over time. Positive self-talk doesn't mean ignoring real problems or emotions. Instead, it's about framing challenges in a way that empowers you to face them. Instead of "this is too hard," try "this is hard, but I can find a way through." This mindset fosters problem solving rather than avoidance. Sharing your positive self-talk out loud or writing it down can reinforce its power. Saying affirmations or journaling your intentions creates a stronger connection to these supportive beliefs. It also makes your commitment to emotional discipline more tangible and real. Ultimately, using positive self-talk is like giving yourself a steady hand in the midst of emotional storms. It's a tool you carry with you, ready to calm anxiety, reduce anger, and boost confidence. When you practice this habit consistently, it becomes a natural part of how you navigate your emotional world with grace and strength.